Welcome to the Creative Push, an intimate and diverse artist interview series. Here, artists and makers of all kinds share tips, advice, knowledge, and inspiration that you can learn from. I'm your host, Sherry O'Neill, a photographer, artist, writer, and educator. This series is a part of the Learn and Create platform to help artists further their education in creativity, art, and business. Welcome to the Creative Push. I have Allison here today, who is a mixed media artist specializing in glass. I'd love to know a little bit about your childhood.
I think really early from a young age, I started taking an interest in the natural world around me. I started drawing and got really big into painting and things like that. I remember the way my grandmother convinced me to go swimming, and for her to teach me how to swim was to bribe me with an oil paint set.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up all over. My parents divorced when I was about 5, but I was born in Yankton, South Dakota. I've lived all over: Arizona, Utah, Texas, Louisiana, Atlanta, LA. You know, I was traveling between mom and dad. But that culture was really good. I got to see a lot of the United States.
At that age, because you were very young, were you still kind of influenced by the art that you saw, or was it more the culture, or a little bit of both?
I think it was more the act of creating art that was really inspiring to me. I mean, I was always really attracted to beauty, you know, whether it be art, whether it be nature. So that was always the thing for me as an artist, is to create beauty. Kind of take what I've seen, the inspiration that I get, and create it into my own sense of beauty.
I'm curious about growing up as a child and moving so much. Did you use your art as a way to kind of express your feelings?
Absolutely. I definitely think that art for me was a way to go inward and deal with my own emotions.
Because it had to be hard to have friends if you're moving so much.
Oh yeah, friends and divorced parents and stepfathers, so there was a lot of stuff going on. So I think I found joy in that and submersed myself into that instead of everything else going on around me.
So once you got out of high school, did you go off to college?
I went to a community college for a while. I even went to a film and animation school for digital animation and film. But really quickly realized I didn't like creating inside of a computer system. I wanted to actually build it with my hand. So it wasn't long after that, I was like, I just saw glass. And in high school, I had been doing a lot of jewelry. So three-dimensionally became, after I took high school and jewelry, three-dimensional was the one thing that I realized I loved the most, creating three-dimensional objects instead of 2D as drawings. So after high school, I found a glass studio. Turned out it wasn't far away.
And where was this at?
This was in Arizona. So I went to high school out in Arizona in Scottsdale. I walked into this glass studio and I said, listen, I'll sweep and empty your trash for free. And he wasn't going to turn that down. So that's how I started. I had the opportunity to live with my dad for a little bit to get started out in Atlanta. So moved to Atlanta, immediately found the glass studio there. Same thing, I'll sweep and empty your trash for free. And it's not long after that where they're like, hey, can you do this for me? Can you grab this for me? Can you get that for me? And so I worked at a bronze foundry for a friend of his, Jack Ward Sculptural Arts. And I was his only employee for about 4 years making large-scale bronze, which that whole process was also really fascinating to me. Here I was playing with fire in a different form, melting bronze and making molds. And that whole process of the mold making transfers over into a lot of different mediums, you know. So that was also stuff that I was really fascinated with. So I was getting paid. At that particular time in my life, I do remember my brain exploding with knowledge, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can take in and remember all of this information I'm learning at this time, because it was so valuable at that particular time in my life. And then it wasn't long after I started working for Matt at the glass studio, Janky Glass Studio down in Atlanta, teaching classes for him and assisting him, and then began renting the studio from him and creating my own work. I taught classes for SCAD, Kennesaw State.
And did you seek that out, or did they come to you? Or?
Well, it was through Janky Studios. Okay. So He had the masters.
Mm-hmm.
I taught the classes,
Okay.
but they were through his studio. There's so much involved in glass. There's so much money and equipment. The schools, to be able to put together a glass department is a huge undertaking. So they basically just put it on their roster, and people could get credits and take glassblowing classes and take them through Jenke Studios down in Atlanta. I don't just do glass, so I do a lot of mixed media stuff, which requires a whole bunch of equipment. Having a big barn, this is an old cattle barn, was what I needed. And so that's specifically what I looked for, was 3 acres and a barn. This thing had no concrete or electricity or water.
Tell us about the different type of artwork that you work on outside of glass.
I do a lot of casting of metal, mold making, woodworking, fabricating steel, electroforming, growing copper in an acid bath tank. I just like the materials and the textures. All the different materials have different advantages and disadvantages. You know, metal is very forgiving. You can weld it together, you can cut it apart, you can bend it. You could even melt it all back down together if you wanted. The process of jewelry is the same way. It's very forgiving. You can melt it all back down. Gold is gold, even if it's melted back down and remade into something else. And the process of making molds is really an interesting process, because you can make multiples of things. And there is something really beautiful about multiples of a repetition of patterns that is really attractive to the eye, too. Woodworking's very wonderful material to work with. It's warm. You know, that process of taking something rough and going back to this beautiful polish is very enjoyable, just the whole process. And I think a lot of art, for me as well, it's kind of the process of it that is really enjoyable. Specifically glass. It's playing with fire. Who doesn't love playing with fire? You're dealing with risk, and it keeps you on your toes. That's exciting. And then you could lose it all, you know? And maybe that's why I keep coming back to it, is that challenge. Maybe that's why I focus so much on the glass, is it's just that challenge and the skill level that it takes to even manipulate. Well, it looks like water in a big crucible. You pull it out and you form it into whatever you want, and the sky's the limit.
So that's one of the things I've noticed, a pattern with your art, is the connection to water. Is there a deeper meaning to that?
I think definitely there's a lot going on there. But the majority of that connection with it is I'm building a style that is me, so that when you look at something, you go, oh, that's a Michael Allison. And I think all artists need to find kind of a style. Picasso, you can recognize a Picasso. I'm branching in a lot of different directions. But what seems to get the most attention is this body of work that I've been building. And the water itself is it's the basis of all life. So it's very symbolic of life and that beginnings of everything. It's the water drops are very heavy, very grounded. And then I like to lighten it with birds and things that go on top of that, which are very much the heavens. And it makes a really well-rounded composition visually that you're probably not aware of while you're looking at it. But it has this very heavy drawn and this very light, and it makes a balance, that black and white, that yin and yang, that keeps your eye moving.
Do you incorporate water in your woodwork as well, or is it mostly just with the glass?
I think glass itself it's metamorphic. They've decided it's not a liquid, it's not a solid, but when I work with it, it's liquid. And we don't see it in its liquid state when it's solid. For the most people don't see it at that state. So I like to keep the glass in that liquid form, because for me it is very much a liquid. Water, it'll boil like water. It cracks like ice cubes in warm water. It's very much a liquid. So even when I'm using glass, sometimes that real shiny liquid is what I'm going for in a lot of my work. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes I don't want it to look like glass at all. But that's the great thing about glass. It can look like a lot of different things.
What's your biggest failure?
I can't say that I ever really look at anything as the biggest failure, because I just have to keep going or that'll just defeat you. So I always, no matter what, am always trying to find that positive in that negative. So it can be the worst thing in the world, and I'm going to be bummed for a few days, but I'm always looking for that silver lining at it so that I can justify everything that went up to that point leading into it and move forward with it in a positive way and feel good about it.
Who are your artistic influences?
I never went to school for art or art history. That may be one of those things I wish I had known different. I would love to know more. I loved Salvador Dali's work, that really out there, out of the box. I like things that are very unusual, that attract me. Glass really became my focus. Really loved it, a passion. And then I've kind of come back and done back to, more of the metals and woodworking, some of my past. Really, a lot of the influences are glass makers. And it definitely was Dale Chihuly on TV that I just saw glass, and he likes to keep his work in the solid state, very liquid. That, to me, was beautiful. And after just seeing glass being created on TV, that was what I wanted to do. There's been some really amazing glass blowers out there. One in particular is William Morris. He's retired now, but he kind of innovated the glass world by bringing in sculpting tools and sculpting the glass and creating the glass in a totally different way than I had ever seen. And up until that point, it was a lot of just symmetrical shapes, the sculpting side of it, trying to create whatever, a rabbit head or birds or any of this stuff, for me was so far out there, one, for my skill level at that time, and also just how. And Billy Morris worked with Ross Richmond, who I studied under, Karen Willenbrink Johnson. These are all really well-known glass artists, and they're still thriving today. Besides Billy Morris, he retired. Probably will come back at it, I think. I think he's just selling off all the work that he already's been saving for so long. He's like, oh, I'm going to take a break, and then you really want my work.
Tell us about your technique.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of little techniques and tricks and things. But as far as the process of coming up with a piece, that technique is all up in my head. And a lot of times, whatever I see in my head, I know exactly, worked down to the nuts and bolts of how it's going to go together. A lot of the work happens for me in my mind. If I think of something, if I don't put it down, it could be lost forever. And ideas are a dime a dozen. There's hundreds of ideas. My sketchbook's full of ideas. It comes down to, what idea do I really want to make? What do I think would be the best? And even then, going back through that sketchbook, I'm like, oh, I really like that. I didn't see that before. I just jotted it down, and going back through it, I may want to revisit that and go to that idea and attempt that.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. I hope you're enjoying the Creative Push. These artist interviews are a labor of love, but it sure would help if you'd consider supporting this podcast with a small monthly donation to help sustain the work and time it takes for me to produce future episodes. You can click the support button, or you can click the link below in the show notes. Any support is greatly appreciated, and you can cancel at any time. Either way, I'm glad to have you here. Please subscribe and share. Now let's get back to the show. What is creativity to you?
I think it's playing. I think for the most part, it's being free enough to play and to not be so, it's too serious, not to take everything so serious, not to take yourself so serious. That's really when the best things happen. It then becomes a lot of work. But the creative part is the fun part. That's playing and just having a great time and not worrying about the money and seeing what happens And then the work begins after you've come up with these great ideas.
What inspires you or motivates you to create?
There's no doubt beauty. I mean, to create things that are beautiful brings me a lot of joy. And I don't keep a lot of those things. They're meant to be shared. And I think that's why public art is so desirable to me. It is for not people that are rich. It goes in libraries and you can go to museums. Of course, a lot of times those are paid for, but just in the parks. And as far as the city's concerned, they want to make sure it's durable, not going to need a lot of maintenance. You know, they have their idea of what they would like their public art to be. And the bidding process is tough just because there's only so many projects out there. So you're dealing with a lot of competition.
What's your biggest struggle with what you do?
My biggest struggle is, at this point, it used to be money, just because it requires so much for glass, energy, gas. I struggle with an employee being able to pay an employee and have somebody help with the process, because I do so much, I can't do it all. And kids and all of that. And
what would the typical job be for someone assisting
that's
you?
the hard part. It would be everything and anything.
They have to understand the process of glass blowing to a certain degree.
It may not even be glass. I might just need someone to help me mow the yard because I need to blow glass. Okay, so it's across the board, all sorts of stuff. It could be just cold working, grinding, cutting glass.
So what do you see in your future?
Lots more beautiful art, hopefully until I get so old that I can't, because I know that my body will eventually start to, but I'll still be creating whatever that is. It won't be glass.
Right.
Glass is very physical. I think I'm probably right there in my prime with glass, and then things start to go downhill. As your body starts to ache and your eyes go.
What is the hardest part about working with glass, physically?
The energy involved is very focused. If you're not focused for 1 second, it's a floor model. It's broken in a million pieces and you've just lost hundreds of dollars. Whether or not you've got a bunch of guys in the studio working with you, because that's like getting the band together. A lot of times you can't do a lot of the difficult stuff that you really want to do unless you have assistants. And those assistants, you're only as good as your assistant. So ideally, at least 3 years. It takes about 3 years till you suck at glass. So at least 3 years in, and a lot of things are just fixing. I'm just taking what I can and fixing it. It's just exhausting. You're dealing with a lot of heat. It's very physical in the sense that you're doing a lot of walking, a lot of stuff with your upper body, carrying the weight of the glass, turning that pipe while it's hot.
And where do you get your supplies to do the work? I mean,
there's really only a couple places.
So you have to mail order, I guess, and have them
Yeah,
delivered?
the colors are made. I think there's only 3 color companies now. They keep going out of business, or the glass that's being produced goes out of business, and then you end up with a new recipe. Glass is formulated differently for different purposes. It's the reason they make you recycle all your glass in different containers, because they don't fit. So when they go and you have to switch up to a new formula of clear glass, we start with clear and we add our color. I can throw everything off. Your colors, there might be certain colors that don't fit. You don't know until it cracks your piece. There are some tests you can do, but there are hundreds of colors. And then the consistency of that glass changes as well. So the different recipes have different consistencies. Some are stiffer, some are squishier, some cool off quicker, and everything about glass is timing. And at any point while you're working the glass, if it falls below 1,000 degrees, it cracks. So the whole time I'm working the glass, it's staying above 1,000 degrees. The crazy thing is the thick glass is going to hold the heat really well, and the thin are going to cool rapidly. So this is just this internal clock going that's telling me these certain things that only comes with experience. And then each different recipe is going to change that some.
Tell me about your workflow as an artist. I know this is one of those places where some artists really struggle with. Do you have a regiment, a daily way that you work? How do you plan out your week? How does that work with you and your art?
I think that partly goes back to the creative part. I try to just play. I just want to play. It is a lot day to day. Obviously, I have a calendar. I use my calendar and I schedule things. I have people that either want custom orders, that need things, classes. But when I don't have those things that are on my calendar, it is sometimes difficult. The weather can dictate our moods, at least my mood, and how I'm feeling about the day and how I'm going to go about my day. I definitely avoid stress at all costs. Stress I do not like at all. So for the most part, I try to avoid it altogether. So I don't take things too seriously. I just try to keep going, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, as long as I'm progressing. So I just continue, and I do whatever at that moment, when I have nothing else going on, of course, what I want to do, but as long as it's getting something accomplished and getting things done. I've always said if I could live to be maybe 300 would be a good number, because there's so much I want to do. And now I'm just getting to the point where I've accumulated all these skills and knowledge that it's a shame that my body would start to go and I can't keep progressing these ideas, these techniques and all of this. I mean, it's just the ideas. I have so many ideas.
What would you like to learn that you haven't learned yet?
I've always wanted to fly a plane. I keep thinking big, for sure. That's one thing. I got to always remember to shoot for the stars, because I think it's too easy to get settled, and I think it's too easy to be defeated, and I think we really do manifest our own realities.
How do you market your work?
Mostly Google. As far as the studio, I do have a gallery over in Leapers Fork called the Copper Fox. John and Lisa over there are awesome. They have a beautiful gallery. That's the only gallery I have at the moment, besides when I do classes and having people, a captivated audience, my own gallery here.
Tell us about the classes. Can people take classes from you?
Classes are awesome. They are amazing. Everybody loves classes. They're playing with fire again. I've been teaching for 15 years. I love teaching. As an artist, I don't get to interact with people a lot because I'm kind of in my own world. And I am a people person, so that's why I started teaching classes. And the classes, a lot of times they're private classes, as long as I have 2 people, but they can be up to a group of 6. And they're just a blast. Everything about it is exciting for the person that's taking the class, because they've never experienced liquid glass before. And you get burned, so there's some risk involved that keeps people on their toes and a little excited about it.
What advice can you offer to someone starting on their own path as an artist?
Don't expect to make any money. You're going to sweep floors and empty trash for a good long while before you actually are like, oh, okay, I might be able to be hired and be worth something to somebody. If you don't have the passion or the dedication or the perseverance, you won't make it. You have to be really passionate and know that that's what you want to do. And I know that that's a tough place to be, because there was a moment where I was like, okay, I either jump and make the leap, and this is what I do, or I do something different. And I think that's the critical moment.
Where can people find your work? You said Google, and you have a website, correct?
fluidglassmovements.com. All of this can be found, though, right on Google at Nashville Glassblowing, and Instagram, Nashville Glassblowing, Facebook, Nashville Glassblowing.
Thank you so much for doing this interview with me on The Creative Push.
Thank you, Sherry. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, my intention is to offer inspiration that excites you to want to get out there and create something amazing. Be sure to check out some of the other episodes. There's more information below in the show notes, including links to other great stories, tips, and resources. Drop me a message or comment at any time, and I hope that you'll sign up to be a part of this creative tribe.